For the entire history of life on Earth, biology operated by a strict set of rules, driven by slow, random mutation. Today, humanity possesses the ability to bypass that process entirely. We can directly edit the molecular code that builds a human being. This animation illustrates the immediate, staggering promise of this technology. By locating and replacing specific flawed sequences of DNA, we have a biological pathway to permanently eradicate hereditary diseases like Huntington's and sickle cell, sparing millions from suffering we once accepted as inevitable. But if we make these changes in a person's reproductive cells, a process called germline editing, the edits don't stop with the patient. As we see cascading here, those genetic alterations will be inherited by their children, their grandchildren, and every subsequent generation down the line. We have moved from observing biology to actively programming it, a transition that creates biological and social risks that our existing legal and ethical systems were never designed to manage. Figuring out what to do with this power isn't a simple matter of choosing between right and wrong. It requires navigating a collision of deeply entrenched worldviews. To map this out, we can look at the debate through 4 distinct perspectives. The optimist argues for the moral imperative of scientific progress, while the skeptic warns of biological caution. The philosopher zeroes in on the existential risk to our identity, and the pragmatist focuses purely on structural regulation. Navigating gene editing safely requires the pressure created by these competing worldviews, as each perspective acts as a necessary check on the blind spots of the others. The debate begins with an opening argument from the optimist. If we possess the capacity to cure a debilitating genetic disease, refusing to use it is a form of active harm. In this view, inaction has a body count. But the skeptic points to the reality of the diagram in front of us. The human genome is incredibly complex. When you force a fix on one targeted gene, you risk off-target effects, where interconnected downstream genes fracture or behave unpredictably. The philosopher takes a step back from the biology entirely, asking an existential question. If humanity begins actively designing its own source code, do we remain the exact same species that made the decision to start editing? Then the pragmatist cuts through the theory. The technology is already here. Our decision now rests on whether we push it into transparent, regulated clinics or leave it to grow in unregulated labs abroad. Good intentions alone cannot guide us. Without accounting for the interconnected fragility of human biology and the realities of global technological access, the optimist's moral imperative quickly becomes a liability. To defend the path forward, the optimist points to existing success stories. The United Kingdom successfully legalized mitochondrial replacement therapies under incredibly strict, cautious oversight. The skeptic's counter to that is historical reality. Global oversight works right up until the moment a single bad actor decides they no longer need permission. In 2018, the world saw exactly what that looks like. The scientist pictured here, He-Jian Cui, announced he had successfully edited the DNA of twin human embryos to make them resistant to HIV. He bypassed the global scientific consensus and performed the edits in secret. For the philosopher, this confirms a hard truth about human history. Once a technology becomes possible, humanity has never successfully uninvented it. We only learn to live with the permanent consequences it leaves in its wake. To manage those consequences, the pragmatist relies on this matrix. We must separate somatic edits contained within a single patient from germline edits that pass to descendants. We also separate therapeutic edits, curing disease, from enhancement edits, upgrading human traits. The 2018 Rogue experiment forced an immediate recalculation. The global scientific community had to stop treating human gene editing as a future philosophical dilemma and start treating it as an active crisis requiring immediate damage control. At the extremes, the final arguments solidify. The optimist looks at the individual, arguing a child born free of cystic fibrosis will never debate the ethics of their cure. The skeptic looks at the species, pointing out that descendants carrying permanent, unconsented genetic alterations will simply have to live with our mistakes. The philosopher leaves us with a stark binary. Are we assuming the role of authors over human nature, or remain its stewards? The pragmatist offers a compromise to keep us moving. Permit the therapeutic, non-heritable edits immediately so patients can get treatment. but enforce a strict decade-long international moratorium on editing the germline while we study the long-term effects. Neither absolute scientific freedom nor absolute paralyzed caution will work. Moving forward requires accepting some level of risk while installing heavy blast doors between our experiments and the future of the human gene pool. The dilemma we face is heavy because both sides are correct. Doing nothing condemns millions to biological suffering, but unchecked scientific hubris carries a permanent, irreversible price for the entire species. The solution is recognizing that gene editing cannot be treated as a monolith. A blanket ban is as reckless as blanket approval. We have to draw precise, heavily guarded boundaries. As this comparison illustrates, the most critical boundary we must defend today is the line between the two sides of the screen. A somatic edit ends with one person. A germline edit is a decision to rewrite the human timeline. Regulatory panels and international bodies are drawing these lines right now, but a technology that alters the literal definition of humanity demands societal input, not just closed-door decisions made by the people holding the scissors. As those boundaries are drafted, the responsibility falls on us to understand the stakes. When you look at the potential to rewrite human DNA, which voice in the room do you align with?